Welcome to Halacha in a Year, where we can get to learn all the most relevant halacha through the prism of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. You are listening to Rabbi Ya'akov Trump. This year is kindly sponsored by the Moshe Group and CA in zechus of Rivka Biela, bas נחמה שיפרה, and in honor of Rabbi Trump. Today we carry on in Siman, the 90th section of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Last time we did, in the first part of the section of Siman, we looked at the things which are not actual work, like running, talking about business, and involvement in thought or reading activities which are not related to Shabbos. Today we're going to do the second part of Siman, which is really about work done through a non-Jew. So this is what's called in Halacha as Amira La'akum, as speaking to a non-Jew to do a melacha. And there are two parts to this prohibition. Most people only know about the first part. The first part is the one's not allowed to ask a non-Jew to perform a melacha on Shabbos. However, the second part is one may not benefit from a halacha done by a non-Jew for a Jew on Shabbos. Just to understand what that means. It is not just that one has a boundary of talking to a non-Jew about doing melacha. One may also not benefit from the halacha that non-Jew did for one as well. That is a completely different perspective, and that would mean to say many things that people do or benefit from are actually prohibited. Let's jump straight in. Why does this prohibition exist? So there are two different versions as to why this rabbinic prohibition exists. One is based on Rashi and Avodah Zarah, which says it's based on the pasuk in Yeshayahu, which has been the topic of our Siman, our chapter in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which is Mimtzoch Chafatzecho v'daber davar, speaking of matters. We're not allowed to be speaking of matters which are related to melacha, so you certainly cannot ask a non-Jew to do a melacha. However, there's a Rashi, which is found in Masechah Shabbos, which is a little bit of a different perspective, and that is where he says that a non-Jew becomes a shliach, and it's like one is performing the melacha oneself. That is not allowed on Shabbos as well. These are two separate reasons which are given to this, and we'll see how they have impact on halacha. Can I hint to a non-Jew? So, just before going further, there are two different methods of hinting. There's remez b'lashon tzivoy, hinting in a way where one tells it's clear one's describing what needs to be done, and there's remez shelo b'derech tzivoy, which is essentially a description. The room is dark. The fridge is off. Right? That's a description. Remez shelo b'derech tzivoy. If one's saying a hint, which is b'derech tzivoy, where one includes the instructions, the implications of the instructions, that is not allowed under any circumstance. If it is where one is doing a remez shelo b'derech tzivoy, so one is simply describing the situation, then that is allowed on Shabbos if and this is providing that one is not benefiting from the melacha done by the non-Jew. Meaning, let's understand what this means. It is only allowed if the non-Jew, let's say, takes away a melacha. Saying, if, for example, the lights are left on in the bedroom, one says the lights are on. The non-Jew understands, switches off the lights. One's allowed to use that room because, in that circumstance, one's benefited from the absence of the melacha. Not for the light which is switched on, but from the light which is switched off. That's fine. But if it was the other way around and the lights were off and there was no light whatsoever in the room, and one says it's dark in here, and the non-Jew switches on the light, one may not benefit from that as well, even though one hinted and got around the first part of Amir La'akum, which is telling them one is not allowed to benefit from that. If there was already light in the room, and this is an extra light, that's fine, because it's just moisif, it's adding. But if it were to be just for a Jew, and the Jew is benefiting from it, there was nothing beforehand, that is a problem. So let's say it's Friday, and I tell a non-Jew to do something for me on Shabbos. Is that allowed? The answer is no. The reason is because even if you ask him to perform the melacha before Shabbos, his actions on Shabbos are still associated with you and it's considered part of shlichus, the messengership which you sent them on. What about the other way around? On Shabbos, can I tell a non-Jew to do something on Saturday night, on Motzei Shabbos? The answer is no again. Because even though there's no problem of shlichus, of telling him to do something for you, because by the time they're doing it on Motzei Shabbos, it's not prohibited to do it. But when I'm saying it now, it's mimtzoch chavatzecho v'daber davar. It's saying something which is prohibited, which is talking about melacha. So on either end we're caught, because the two reasons of Rashi, when they may not tell a non-Jew to do something from Friday to do it on Shabbos, and we may not tell a non-Jew to do something on Shabbos to do it for Motzei Shabbos because of the two separate reasons. Are there any exceptions? So yes, since one is allowed since it's only the reason of daber davar, on saying on Shabbos or Motzei Shabbos, if it's for a mitzvah, it is allowed. So when they tell a non-Jew to do something for a mitzvah, that will happen on Motzei Shabbos. Can I hint before Shabbos about something on Shabbos? The answer is yes, but one cannot gain benefit from it unless it is the absence of melacha, just adding benefit as we discussed beforehand. But again, if one has to say that, hint before Shabbos, one can just sort of figure out the situation then without having to enter this. Now, next question. If a non-Jew is about to do a melacha for a Jew, can we just let them do it? The answer is no. If they're going to be benefiting from something, if the Jew is going to be benefiting from a melacha done by a non-Jew for a Jew, then one may protest and not allow them to do this. But one must protest and not allow them to do it, because it's not just about telling them to do it, it's about also not benefiting from what they did. May a Jew involve a non-Jew preventing a loss on Shabbos? So the answer is yes. If there's a significant loss, so let's say one has a wine barrel which is leaking, and if one leaves it, one's going to lose the entire barrel. A Jew may call a non-Jew without giving any direct or indirect instruction, and he can just say, whoever prevents this loss will not lose his reward, and after Shabbos you can pay them back for helping you save it, but you may not give instructions. When may a non-Jew be asked directly to do a prohibited activity? So if the prohibited activity is not a melacha, so it's not a Torah prohibition, but it is a shvus, it is a rabbinic enactment, and the case is a case of a mitzvah, one may ask them to do it. That's called shvus to shvus, meaning asking the non-Jew is a rabbinically prohibited activity. To do a rabbinically prohibited activity in the case of mitzvah, that would be allowed, even to benefit in those cases as well. So what constitutes a mitzvah? Let's say we have a chodesh ein bo sakana, a person who's incapacitated in a certain situation, and certainly if somebody's got a situation of pikuach nefesh, one may ask a non-Jew to do certain rabbinic prohibitions for the needs of that chayla. And another example is a need of a community. Let's say the eruv is down and needs fixing. Non-Jew can be enlisted, or let's say there's a Muslim man is missing a part of Oneg Shabbos. Right, the cholent goes off, and it's already fully cooked. But one says, "Oh, it went off." In those situations, and there's nothing else to eat, then it may be allowed. But if one has other things to eat, there's chicken, there's salad, and there's other things. It's just one less thing. That's not allowed. It's only if there's a significant thing which is missing, and one will not be able to enjoy one's Oneg Shabbos in that situation as well. What about financial loss? So if the only Isser was muktzah, then one is allowed to, then it's shus to shus b'makom hefsed meruba, and then it would be allowed as well. When else can one ask a non-Jew to do melacha? So there's certain situations, let's say that there's sickness. With this is the halacha of hakol chalim eitzel atzina. Everybody's considered a sick person when it comes to the cold weather. So if let's say there's no heat, one may ask a non-Jew to switch on the heat, certainly if it is for a congregation, if it is for a shul, for a large amount of people. However, when it comes to the cold, the other way around, let's say it's very hot, what about switching on the air conditioning as well? Or lower is switching off the air conditioning. Switching off the air conditioning is saving them from the cold, that's fine. But there are poskim say on a very hot day, if the AC in the shul is off, one may ask a non-Jew to switch it on. Again, it's a really hot day. It's not just that people are super sensitive because, but we're talking about people who will not be able to continue davening because it's so hot. In such a situation, a non-Jew may be asked. Today I see it's a free-for-all. Anybody thinks they can tell the custodian whatever they want. That's not what's framed in halacha. We're talking about a situation where a person is in a state of chayli, where a person would be considered sick because of the excessive heat. In that situation, that would fall into this category. Just mild discomfort is not falling into that category. What about the for needs of the dead? So one may not send a non-Jew to notify other members of the family. When a person's dead, that's not pikuach nefesh. That's finished. Can a non-Jew transport produce for a Jew and bring it into storage? No. He may not even instruct him or even allow the unloading without objection. May a Jew oversee the non-Jew measuring grain that is payment for a debt on Shabbos? The answer is yes, because the grain still belongs to the non-Jew. And the Jew may sit there and observe that cheating does not happen, but he may not discuss the business. Can a Jew ask a non-Jew to make cheese from his own milk on Shabbos for later purchase? The answer is yes, because the non-Jew is doing his work. And the instruction is to do his work, but it belongs to the non-Jew at this point in time. May a non-Jew collect the goods he purchased from a Jew on Shabbos? Ideally, he should be prevented from doing so, even though it's really his, because it looks like the Jew instructed him to bring his own assets. What happens if someone forgot to light a yortzai candle? May they ask a non-Jew to light it on Shabbos? On Shabbos, no, but during twilight, that's another exception. One may ask a non-Jew to do something for a mitzvah. That means after the sun is set, but it's not yet stars out, at least for the first 13 minutes, one may ask the non-Jew to light that Yortzai candle for Dvar Mitzvah. Are there any other exceptions? So there are two other exceptions which are worthwhile noting, and they are Adaita Denavshe. So if the non-Jew is doing a malacha based on their own benefits. So for instance, if you ask a non-Jewish person in the house to help wash the dishes, and they decide to use a sponge and hot water, that is all right, because they could really do it in the mutter fashion, which is without a sponge, just with one of those scratchy plastic things, and cold water. They chose to use the sponge and hot water because it's easier for them. Similarly, in a situation where, let's say, you get to an apartment building and the guard buzzes you in, you are allowed to push open the door. The reason is because he could have been a little less lazy and walked over to the door and opened it mechanically. But he decided just to sit in his booth and press the button. That Adaita Denafshe, he's doing a malacha for a Jew, but it's because it's his own benefit. He chose the Asr way to do it. That is allowed to be benefited from. Similarly, what's called a Amir al-Akamid, a Psik Reisha, if you ask them to do something which is mutter, and by doing that, automatically something else happens, you're allowed to benefit from that as well. So for instance, if you ask the non-Jew, I left my talis bag in the car, please go get it from the car, you're allowed to ask him to do that, even though by opening up the car, the light will go on. That's a psik reish. You did not ask him to switch on the light, you asked him simply to get the talis in the back of the car. That would be allowed as well. Now, let's just clarify one thing over here. We've just spent just over 10 minutes discussing Amir al-Akom. This topic is so complex and so in-depth with so many details, this could take 6 months to go through just to understand the complexities of these situations. This is a very, very much scratching the very edge of the surface of this particular area. So please don't think that after having listened to this, one knows all the details. There are so many details that apply to this, but at least this gives us a sensitivity to the fact that simply asking non-Jews or benefiting from what a non-Jew does on Shabbos or a Jew is not simple under any circumstances. It requires asking questions because it's not simple. This is all part of this very important halacha of shlichus and mimtzah chavasecha v'daber davar, a wonderful and meaningful